My name is Ronnie, and I am one of the organizers of tonight's event. This is a community conversation. This is our second season. Is that a fair way to say it? Community Conversations are a partnership with the Family Resource Center, the Lopez Community Land Trust, Transitions Lopez Island, and Leadership San Juans, and also the newly formed Lopez chapter of Standing Up for Racial Justice has had a little bit of a hand. And we have terrific support from the library and the Lopez Bookshop, so be sure to look there for resources. On your way in, you probably passed a table that had green folders on it, and if you had a chance to grab one, there's some really good stuff in there about our featured organization, Got Green. So there's also, you can sign up there to be added to the Community Conversations email list and also Got Green's email list if you'd like to keep in touch. I want to take a moment to acknowledge and give thanks for the land that we're standing on. We're on land in a sea that has historically been hunted and fished and lived on by Coast Salish people, specifically those who speak the straight Salish language, today represented by the Lummi and Salish tribes. And so we just want to take a moment to recognize that and appreciate those folks and keep that in our minds and show up in solidarity with Indigenous struggles happening all over the place. Very important. And also building stronger and more cooperative relationships to preserve the area that we all love and the Salish Sea. Our goal tonight is to learn, but also to practice participatory democracy and engage in a respectful exchange of ideas. We're recording this evening's event. You'll be able to find a link to it on the Family Resource Center website in a few days. We will not be recording the Q&A following the presentation. Speaking to us tonight, we have some really amazing organizers from Got Green. And Got Green is a really inspiring South Seattle-based, sorry, I can't abide a pen on the floor, community organization, grassroots, people of color-led organization that works at the intersections of environmental justice, racial justice, and economic justice. Their work is super powerful. I'm so excited that they could be here tonight to share it with all of us. And here with us tonight, we have Sean, Jill, Yolanda, Manu, and Johnny. So I'm going to turn it over to them.
Thanks so much for that wonderful introduction. So great, so grounded and powerful. Once again, my name's Sean. I'm the development director here at Got Green, and what a wonderful space y'all created. So great to be on Lopez. I came once before, about 4 years ago, and stayed at Auckland with another racial justice organization that I do work with. So it's good to be back and hear about the work that y'all are doing here. Like we said earlier, we're all from Got Green. And before we talk a little bit about our presentation, I wanted to give a chance for each of the speakers here tonight to introduce themselves, what their role in Got Green is, and maybe when they got involved, if that would be cool. So, as I said, I'm Sean, the development director. I've held this role for about 2 years, but previous to that was a big volunteer with Got Green. And I've been in Seattle for about 10 years.
Hello, my name is Jill Mangaliman. I'm the executive director of Got Green. I joined Got Green as a member in 2009 as one of the second cohort of their weatherization team. I later joined their founding board and eventually did a 2-year leadership transition with our founder, Michael Wu, joined the staff in 2013. I became director in 2014. So. Very excited to be here. I have much love for Lopez Island. I also visited here to see Audlin and go to a Hay Fest a couple years ago. Born and raised in Seattle, and yeah, thank you for having us.
My name is Manu. I am a young leader. I'm in the Young Leader in the Green Movement Committee, so I'm a volunteer. I've been with Got Green since 2014 as a volunteer, and yeah, I've just been excited ever since to be a part of this awesome organization. I've lived in Seattle for about 9 years. It'll be 9 years in May. Yeah, I feel like I've created a family.
Hi, my name is Yolanda. I got started with Got Green back in 2013, I think it was. I started off as a young leader and then transitioned on to the food access team, which I'm still on now. I've been living in Seattle for about 6 years now. I'm originally from the East Coast. And I just realized I've been with Got Green for half that time. And I'm also on the board of Got Green as well. So thank you for having me.
My name is Johnny. I'm with the Young Leaders Committee. This is my first visit to Lopez and to the islands. And I just want to thank everyone for coming out here. I know it's a big effort to come out to events like this, and I know some people even took a ferry to come out here. So I just want to thank you so much. My name's Johnny. I'm in the Young Leaders Committee, and I've been a young leader for the past year. I am not a board member. I am up for votes to be a board member, but as we know, elections just sometimes don't turn out the way you want them to.
We'll see. Cool. Thanks, everybody. Would you mind doing a favor for me throughout the presentation? I didn't, either of you actually that are close to the computer, by changing the slides throughout. I'm not sure exactly how you do it. I think it's like maybe one of the arrows.
Yeah,
That's all.
totally.
That'd be great. So I'll let you know in just 1 second. Before we do that, so the name of our presentation is Environmental Justice in the Age of Trump. So we're going to be talking a lot about the political context that we're in and why Got Green's work in this political moment matters now more than ever. And before we go into our agenda for the evening, wanted to share this picture that's up here. We just recently had this artwork made by one of our close friends. Yeah, that's what I'm thinking because of the train. Yeah. All the people that are featured in this picture are actually members of Got Green or part of Got Green's community, which is a really wonderful thing. And then the main shot is the opening of the South End, or Rainier Avenue, which is where we're based. It's based in the Rainier Valley in South Seattle. And we'll talk a little bit more about that and the conditions that are there. And also, it's kind of like a shout out to our broader movement landscape in Washington State. So you see folks with flags and banners putting up solar panels, but you also see folks working in the fields, families, farm workers. One of the things that we really prize as Got Green that we'll talk a little bit about is building urban to rural solidarity. So how do we, living in the city, extend our solidarity to folks in rural areas and vice versa? So just wanted to have that ground our work for tonight. So if you go to the next slide. Perfect. And I think you might need to hit it a few times because there's some texts that are there. Little fancy thing. One more time. Perfect. So tonight, as I said before, we're going to be talking about the political moment that we're in, nationally, locally, the conditions that we're operating under. We're also going to be sharing a little bit about the broader movement vision, like the long-term goals of what social change will look like, and how that really anchors our work, as well as sharing what Got Green's vision and purpose is as an organization. We'll share with you about our strategy. You heard a few folks talk about the committees that they're a part of, what are the campaigns that they're working on, how are we winning victories each and every day that are impacting people's lives and shifting the environment in South Seattle. And then we'll close the night by sharing how Got Green's work fits into a broader movement of social change. So it's not just us working on these issues, it's a whole lot of folks around the world and around Seattle. So with that, I think Johnny is going to be sharing a little bit about the national context that we're in.
Okay, cool. Thanks for being here. And again, I'll have a lot to learn from everyone here in this community conversation. I'm sure everyone's been keeping up with current events as well. I would say that it's probably impossible to recap every horrible thing that Trump has done in the past 3 months. But suffice to say, everything he has done in the past 3 months has not been good for the Varga left and for people of color. In that sense, I believe Trump got a similar vote total to past Republican candidates in Romney and McCain. But this time in this election, it's opened a whole can of worms in terms of right-wing hate and racism at the base, as well as opening the door for a lot of really just Trump's friends and letting them take over a lot of federal agencies and sort of a corporate takeover of a lot of those agencies. And so, in a way, as the right has gotten stronger, our job on the left has gotten ever more important. And so Trump is working on currently gutting the APA and loosening environmental regulations. He's working on revitalizing the Keystone Pipeline and bringing back and moving forward the Dakota Access Pipeline. Locally here, it's opened up a lot of scary situations for people of color on the ground and for people on the ground in general, in that there was a shooting in Kent where a Sikh man was shot in his driveway, and in Lake Stevens, a young African-American boy was apparently hung from a tree. And so these are the situations we're dealing with, and so I think people on the grounds have crisis response on their minds in that sense. At the same time, with this mass opening of hate, it's also opened up opportunities for mass resistance. And so we do have the movements that people of color and other people have worked around in Standing Rock, the Black Lives Matter movement, and Not One More. And so these are places we can build around, and these are places that Got Green has been working intersectionally central to the last 10 years.
Excuse me. Yes, and so giving into context what's going on nationally, just to let you know, Got Green works very locally. We're a place-based organization. However, the conditions that we're facing is being felt by communities across the country. It didn't start with Trump. These conditions existed even before Election Day happened. And the things that we're facing in our communities, like other communities around the country, exclusion, our folks, people of color, low-income folks, youth have been, facing unemployment at a higher rate, facing exclusion from opportunities such as higher education, such as green, like now it's like the green economy. And they call it the green ceiling. Actually, it refers to this 16% cap of leadership or management positions held by people of color across the country. Only 16% are held by folks of color in all environmental fields. That includes government, includes unions, philanthropy, and nonprofits. We also see rapid displacement. People of color are seeing especially folks who live in urban centers, seeing the rising costs of living, housing, redevelopment of areas, gentrification pushing people out. We also see that in cases of as massive corporations are buying up land, taking land from that were traditionally undesirable neighborhoods. And lastly, disposed of, where communities are being disposed of or sacrificed, sometimes referred to as sacrifice zones, where either incarcerated or poisoned, and it's a known fact that people who live in poorer communities are much more likely to have higher rates of asthma because they're most likely to live in a Superfund site, and that leads to lesser years life expectancy. And so these are all things that our people have been dealing with, again, for many decades. And I would say that, Got Green and our folks come from a long legacy of fighting for communities to survive and to thrive, and that these are conditions that have existed for a long time. Climate change, again, not a new issue. People have been talking about it for years, and it's actually, we see it as a threat multiplier. It exacerbates these conditions. Nothing displaces destroys a community faster than a disaster. And so we see it happening in the global south with hurricane, the global south, like Typhoon Haiyan. Entire populations or islands are facing, such destruction, and also in Hurricane Katrina and Storm Sandy in New York, the poorest communities, it took a big hit and displaced a lot of people and killed a lot of people. And so that's something that is why climate change is one of our main issues, because we know that it exacerbates the conditions that already exist in our communities.
Let's go on to the next slide. Oh, is this,
Oh, too soon. Oh, okay, I'll go back. So this is actually a framework that comes from our national friends at Movement Generation. They're based out of Oakland. And basically this is a vision that, we've been talking with a lot of our allies across the country about what is the vision that we have, so we know what the problems are, what is the world that we want to build. And the current economy that we're living in is extractive. We see it in our workplaces, we see it in our government. There's exploitation, there's militarization, there's unequal distribution of wealth and power. We live in a dig, dump, burn economy where communities are sacrificed. And again, there's a focus on consumerism. And that what we're trying to build towards is a living economy, one that's regenerative, one that is sustainable, and not just sustains the environment, but also sustains our community. And so we envision our workplaces to be cooperative, our worldview to be caring, and to see the world as sacred, as the environment, as a place we want to be stewards for. We want to see deep democracy in our governments that serve the people, resources that, again, are sustaining and not extracting from our communities, from the earth, and then, again, making sure that we're taking care of our social well-being, so taking care of each other. And in order to get that, the strategies are to stop the bad, build the good, divest from the power of this economy, and invest into our power, into this economy, and feed and grow. And we often talk about how do we do this, and it's a balancing act. You can't just only focus on stopping the bad, you actually have to build the new at the same time, and you can't just divest from their power, not invest into this visionary economy. And so again, we're part of the work is also changing the rules and pulling the resources back into the local communities, instead of concentrating it into very few hands across the nation. And so this is something you can find online with the Our Power campaign, which is part of a movement to create visionary economies that lift up our communities. We've actually been holding movement assemblies with our partners up in Bellingham and Tacoma and Portland, and trying to build more spaces where we can actually practice deep democracy visions with each other, and how do we build that economy together. And so I will transfer now.
So I noticed a few of you saw that you have a copy of that in your green folder. So if you want it was a little hard to read. You have your own copy of that Movement Generation made, and on the flip side of that, there's further resources of them explaining their analysis around that, and articles that you can check out too for further reflection and study. So we wanted to share, we just recently created not only a new website, but a new vision statement for the organization. And I think being inspired by different organizations and organizers around the country, how important it is to be aware of the conditions that we're under right now, but also what will change look like, on the horizon? How will the world be different because of our work? And did a huge visioning process over the last year involving our board, involving our grassroots members, even participating in conversations with other folks from other organizations too, to seek inspiration. So I wanted to share Got Green's vision statement, and maybe to make it slightly more participatory, we could have folks in the audience read this aloud. That feels good. Anyone want to read the first line? Cool. Would you like the mic or?
Is the first line the goal or the work meeting? Okay. God Green envisions a world where people of color and low-income families live, work, learn, and pray in healthy communities where people can.
If you want to pass it down, maybe that might make it easier. Yeah, let's go.
Work meaningful jobs that nourish our earth, our communities, and our souls.
Eat affordable, healthy food that is grown with dignity for workers and the environment.
Live in safe and sustainable housing rooted in climate-resilient neighborhoods.
Care for our environment and our relationships to the land, the climate, and each other.
Thanks everyone for reading that. So that's where we're hoping to go. You know, that's a bold, powerful world. And it was really important for us to have language that resonated with our membership, the base that we're organizing around. So like thinking about this, because of the work that we're doing on the ground, our day-to-day, you know, putting pressure on City Hall, waging campaigns, it's ultimately towards this new vision. So we're going to share a little bit about how we get there and what Got Green's work looks like. So if you could go to the next slide.
Yeah. So to get to where we are now, I think it's important to remember where we've come from. We started as a weatherization organization that worked towards training people within the community the skills to build, sort of literally building a greener community within South Seattle. And this looked like that. It looked like people of color who didn't necessarily have the skills to do that, but then they worked on building those skills, and then were able to do that within their own community. However, what ended up happening is that even though they had the skills and the capacity to do the work, they weren't being hired to do the work themselves, because instead, you know, companies would hire people from outside the city or outside the communities that these people were living in, and you know, bringing them in to do that work within their communities. So it felt very extractive in so many ways. It felt like you know, the people were spending gas money and, you know, polluting the air just driving into the city to do work that was across the street from somebody else that could have easily done the work. Recognizing this, you know, Got Green adjusted the work that they were doing and started a campaign that focused on targeted local hire. How many people have heard of this campaign? So a couple of people over there, right? And what that really means, what this campaign actually did, and this, you know, before that campaign started, Got Green really needed to listen to what the community was asking for, what the community needed. And so what the campaign did, it focused on, it worked with with City Hall and said that if you're going to have work done within our community, then that work has to be representative of the people that live here. So if you're going to, you know, have this big construction project, then a certain percentage of the workers at the construction project need to be from that community. Let's go to the next slide. And this is really, you're taking notes and doing that at the same time. One more time. So yeah, that's exactly what our approach is. It's community organizing. Like the idea of community organizers bring people together to get sort of to build power that they wouldn't be able to do or to have individually. And we all have individual power, and we're not saying that's not important, but there is a special kind of power that comes around when we work together and we build that kind of power. And this is how we kind of determine that. You know, it's really important to focus the work within the community and to recognize that whatever the community needs, the people within the community are best able to figure that out. You know, and really have that rooted in this idea of self-determination, you know, not having somebody from like a higher degree or a position of some sort of power dictating what other people need, but really gathering that information and having the community determine what they need themselves. And as you're doing that, you know, really building the leadership from the people that are most impacted, or you know, have the most understanding of the problems you're trying to solve within that community. So building leadership is really powerful, important. And then what emerges from that is a transformation within the community and outside of the community. And I think we've seen that. A few other people are going to talk a little bit about what kind of transformation happens when we move and really embody this process. But let's, thank you. Next slide. And so we've divided GOT Green. I think you heard me saying that I belong to the Young Leaders in the Green Movement committee. And over time, we've divided into 3 specific committees to deal with specific things. And I think Yolanda is going to talk about that, right? But it's the Food Access Team, the Young Leaders in the Green Movement Committee, and the Climate Justice Committee. All right, Yolanda, you're up.
So I'm not positive on what I was supposed to say exactly. Oh, okay, yes, now. Thank you, that next slide. So I'm part of the Food Access Team, and please excuse that picture there with the sunny day, the sun is in my eyes, I'm going crazy. But this is my family here on the Food Access Team. We ladies are fighting for exactly what the title says, is access to healthy food for people in our community. And our community in the south end of Seattle is made up of mainly low-income people of color. And so as a team, what we work on is making sure that our people in our community have access to fresh, healthy food at a reasonable price. And so what we've done actually before I joined the Food Access Team, I was on the Young Leaders, but first, and then by the time I came to the Food Access Team, they had actually successfully already helped to pass, I don't know, I guess you would call it kind of an initiative within the state called Fresh Bucks. And so Fresh Bucks is a program where people who are on food stamps or part of the SNAP program can go to their local farmer's market, and they can take up to $10 and exchange that for these wooden coins or paper, Fresh Bucks paper, and receive double the money for their $10, and they can do this like once a day. So they can come to a farmer's market on a Monday and put in their $10, their EBT $10, get $20 back, and take that money to spend on fresh fruits and vegetables at the farmer's market, and they can do that for as long as the markets are happening every day. Yes, this started as a city program, but actually it's a program that is now statewide, and we actually have a lot of programs around the country that are replicate programs in a lot of major cities in the U.S. And so how that actually came about was what is now the Food Access Team used to be called the Women in Green. And so they did a survey to find out exactly what the troubles were with people getting access to fresh and healthy food. And so based off of that data, they went to the city and decided to, and talked to them and said, we need to implement a program that looks like this. And so the city decided, yes, that's a great idea. And actually, I should backtrack. So it's actually a very long story, but apparently Chase Bank was decided to fund kind of a pilot program to help low-income folks, and then they actually decided that they were going to take that program away. I think they felt kind of like, okay, we've done something great for the community, and we've done our part, and yay. And so the city decided, well, this was a great program, and we think that you should actually continue this program because our data has shown that we have a lot of people who fall into this category where they, can't afford to go to the farmers markets with the money that they receive, the small amount of money that they receive. And so the pilot program turned into a citywide program, and then, like I said, turned into a nationwide program. And so at one point, the city decided to defund the program cut the budget of the program by half. And so once again, Got Green stepped up along with other organizations and said, no, we need the full funding because the situation hasn't gotten better for folks. If anything, it's gotten worse. So we need the full amount, and we definitely need to continue the program. And so Got Green was able to, I think they were trying to cut it from about 200,000 to about maybe 125,000. And so then I think Got Green got it back up to about 200,000. So. And so now, as a member of the food access team, we are trying to work with the mayor to help pass this sugary drink tax. I don't know if anyone is familiar, anyone heard about this? Yeah. So we have the sugary drink tax that's going to be implemented. The mayor just announced it, I think just late last month, that this is a go. And so we are working to make sure that some of the money that's going to be made from the revenue from this tax goes to people in what we call a food gap. And so what this gap is that it's people who don't necessarily qualify, who make a little bit too much to qualify for food benefits, but are still considered the working poor and have a hard time putting healthy food on the table for their families. And so he's talked about a lot of money that these programs are going to be going to, and so we're just asking for just a small portion of that revenue to go to this program because, like I said, we still have people who are struggling to keep healthy food on the tables. Wages did just go up in Seattle, but wages aren't going up everywhere, and so people are still struggling. And so that's kind of that's pretty much what we're working on right now as the food access team. And we're excited to continue talks with the mayor, to get a meeting with him, and to just make sure that we're part of the conversation. So yeah, that's what I can talk about. Yeah, I'll take
What about making gardens in inner cities and feeding the people through your gardens in the inner cities?
So we do actually have a lot of community gardens. Unfortunately though, the gardens they're not enough to actually supplement a city. Realistically, it's not enough. I think the city would still be relying on food banks and stuff and such to still supplement. There are a lot of women, there are a lot of children to feed, and I don't believe that that's enough. So I think something along with that, having folks who work on farms and different things and make wonderful foods and produce and different things on an island like this, and maybe bringing that to Seattle to kind of help, that's more of what we need, because that goes right into the programs like the Fresh Bucks. It's local, it's all local, and the program would survive that way. So yeah, I don't think necessarily that maybe the community gardens could supplement, but just working with all communities and having programs like that, I think is something that would probably work a little bit better. Yeah. So. All right. So moving on to Johnny.
Thanks. And so the Young Leaders campaign started out as a community survey 3 years ago to understand what young people thought about the climate justice movements and how they could get involved. And what we found was that young people wanted to participate in the movements, but at the same time, they wanted to put food on the table first. And so that's how the Young Leaders campaign started, and that from there, we started lobbying the city of Seattle to invest in green jobs for young people. And just a couple of months ago, we passed a resolution with a lot of lobbying. We met with a lot of city council members more than once. Some of them blew us off, and then we came back again, and then they blew us off, and we came back again. And in the end, they ended up investing $200,000 in our campaign. And so that's the work we're doing right now, and it's ongoing. And that's, just to explain, our campaign is working to create comprehensive work experience opportunities that are both good for the environment and our communities, have a racial equity lens in their outreach and ways to retain participants. This includes paying a living wage. And the campaign is also working to create career pathways. And so I think we all know someone who started an internship, was super excited, but then in the end that internship only lasted 6 months. And so we're looking to try and create something a little bit more substantial for young people, starting with the city of Seattle and those internships, and also broadening that and expanding that to private businesses for these meaningful career pathways. And so what do we look for in a green job? What is a meaningful job exactly? Green job, in our definition, or our community-created definition, preserves or enhances environmental health, as well as economic and social well-being of people and communities, and it centers communities most negatively impacted by climate change. Green jobs, again, should pay a living wage, and in the city of Seattle, it's actually north of $15 an hour. It's probably more like $17 or $18 an hour, and steadily rising as we speak. And we want to create equity and opportunities in these jobs while transforming the way we live, work, and play. And so these green jobs could be in multiple sectors in Seattle and in the private sector. And it's a work in progress, and we could definitely appreciate your feedback and help with this campaign.
Can you be more specific? What specific kinds of jobs are you talking about?
Yeah, I can give one example. In one example, there's a point where the city of Seattle was doing so much development and tearing down buildings that they had a mile-long train of debris exiting Seattle every day, just going to the landfill. And that just went against Seattle's mission values as an environmental friendly city. It just didn't look good. And so the city worked to revamp their whole process, and they worked to recycle all those materials in terms of breaking down the buildings and categorizing them and actually being able to do something useful with those materials. In terms of another example of a green job, that is, just had it off the top of my head and I just lost it. Okay, it happens.
Construction.
Yeah, in construction, in the construction industry, and other industries as well. And so, with the environmental justice movements, that is a train that will move forwards and leave with or without people of color getting involved and participating. And then we see that a lot in our environmental justice movements, and that's there aren't enough people of color because, for whatever reason, people need to, I guess, survive before they can get involved in the movement. And so that's our ultimate goal here, is to get more people involved in the climate justice movement, be able to fight back and organize against a lot of these things that are destroying our environment. And so, yeah, and ultimately wants to train young people and young people of color to create more opportunities in the here and now with these job training programs, with this organizing to create even more opportunities in the future.
The recycle reuse in Seattle is so dear, if anyone's ever been there. The big building where they have incredible cabinets,
Oh yeah,
incredible
the
resource. That needs to
second
be
use
done.
building
Yeah,
materials.
So dear.
Oh yeah, totally. Yeah. Okay, cool. That's all I
That'd be
have.
a job.
Can we do questions afterwards, or so we can get through the presentation? Sure. Thank you.
Thanks, yeah. 2 more slides left, Q&A, for sure. So one of the newest projects that Got Green's been working on has been our Climate Justice Committee's work. So this started a few years ago and was a partnership with another organization that's a close friend, Puget Sound Sage, who I think a few of you in the audience know who they are. They're a policy advocacy organization that does like a lot of grassroots research around environmental, economic justice, and racial justice issues in Seattle. So we set off to do this community survey. As you can tell, this is a trend within Got Green. Like, how do we get information from the community directly to help frame our issues? And ask folks in South Seattle, like, what does climate change mean to you? What are issues that are impacting you on a daily basis? Is climate change connected to that? Is it not? We found out a lot of really powerful information of like people's perception of like, what did climate change mean? And I think it was really telling, like most folks, the dominant narrative around climate change is melting ice caps, polar bears, and things that are like far, far away. But then when we were talking to folks, we found out that a lot of the issues that they were concerned about, from healthy food, having local jobs, having like houses that aren't decrepit and like mold and like high utilities bills, things like that, are directly connected to the environment and climate change and the way that the world is moving. And we had this opportunity in making this report of like, what would it mean to make climate change and climate justice relevant to the communities that we're organizing in? So it became like this shift, this like paradigm shift for us, and I think a lot of folks around the country and around the world, of thinking about addressing climate change from a grassroots level. So like thinking of like climate change, as Jill talked about earlier, as a threat multiplier. Like conditions are already brutal. You know, there's displacement, there's incarceration, there's exclusion, and so much more. Climate change makes those so much worse. So what would it mean for us in preparation for the coming storms that will continue to escalate over the years to be climate resilient? Like what sort of structures in our communities, in our cities, towns, states, and beyond, do we need to like be prepared to weather the storm, as they say? And it became a really powerful opportunity of like, if we're gonna have any chance of surviving climate change and the impacts of climate change, folks need to have access to healthy food. Folks need to have access to a job that's dignified and paid well. Folks need to be rooted in their communities and not feel fear of being displaced and pushed out. You know, like Hurricane Katrina is such a classic example of like climate-related gentrification and the mass displacement that happened with that. And now we're like approaching like climate change issues of like, okay, let's divest from the fossil fuel industry and like the things that are ultimately contributing to climate change. There's actually an article in a lot of these green folders, divest in our communities or divest in fossil fuel industries and invest in our communities. So like thinking about like how do we move money and resources to the grassroots level, you know, in addition to building up a green economy as well. So it's, like I said, at an early stage, and one of the things that it's moving towards and morphing towards is thinking about land, thinking about gentrification, thinking of like rootedness, of like what would it mean to have like rooted, solid communities that have stable housing, that have safe housing, that have energy efficient housing, as well as like access to public transit, and like that being accessible and part of their everyday life. So it's at an early stage, but it's really exciting because we're part of this larger national conversation, and that's sort of the cutting edge of like bringing these new ideas to the table, like housing as a climate change issue, like that's, you know, like that hasn't really been talked about before, and we're trying to draw those connections. Like not just like as an opportunity to like build coalitions, although that's part of it, but also like that's what we need to be doing because they are ultimately very connected if we're going to have transformative solutions for the long haul. And if folks want to like look at the report, it's really powerful and unique. It's called Our People, Our Planet, Our Power. It's on our website as well as Puget Sound State. Unfortunately, we didn't have enough copies to distribute them tonight. And the picture there is like kind of a community report back of like, here are our initial findings. What are your thoughts about this? Let's make meaning of this information. Cool. I think Jill and Yolanda are going to close it out with some conversation about movement building.
And this picture up here, before I forget to make a note about It Takes Roots, is a collaboration between Right to the City, Grassroots Global Justice, Climate Justice Alliance, and Indigenous Environmental Network. We are a member of Grassroots Global Justice Alliance as a grassroots organization. There are, can you imagine other Got Green type organizations around the country? And so we collaborate together, we strategize together, we talk to each other about what's happening in our different areas. And then this is just kind of like the collaboration between all of us around the country.
And so I guess I'll start by talking about the historic Women's March that we just had. And, oh man, where's my paper? So I had, I guess I'm sorry, I don't know I think it's called Friday Harbor, had about 2,000 women that had their own Women's March, so I just want to shout out to Friday Harbor for that. Yeah, we had about three women from the food access team who went to the march in Washington and just came back and said it was a life-changing experience. Got to meet some really great women, got to collaborate and kind of network with a lot of women from around the country. And then, so because of that, well, not because of that, but as part of the women's movement, we actually have one of our food access team members, Tammy, who is going to be heading up our West Coast division of World March of Women organization, and we're really excited to be starting that. She's working really hard to try to get this started, so hopefully maybe we can come back at some point and kind of give you guys an update on what's going on and how we started and how we're continuing and what we'll be doing as part of that. Woo. And something that we're doing as, I guess, the West Coast chapter of the World March of Women US is in our local area, we have a women and families marching contingent that we organize every time there's an action, like May 1st, a big workers' action, or Black Lives Matter actions. We wanted to create spaces where families can come with young children, with elderly, with folks with disabilities. And so actually the stories that one May 1st march, one of our friends, she's in a wheelchair, was struggling, of course, because the march went at an incline. And so 5 of us, they're about my height, we were like trying to like help her catch up with the march, and we're upset that they left us behind and didn't consider creating a route that was accessible. And also there were children too who were exhausted, and so we had to find a way back to to the start of the march to go home. And so something that Got Green started to do with our partners from Families of Color Seattle and Gabriella was to create like some organization with the families. So we'll have our own kind of like Marshall team. We have these Care Bears who help with caring for the children. We usually have a van shuttle in case people need to get from point A to point B.
And also, yeah, just create a space of that's welcoming to ensure that nobody gets left behind of our actions, because this is these are the spaces where families should be able to participate. And we say families, but we are very broad about families. Like, families can be non-traditional, families could be your household, the people you live with, the people you care for. Something at the Women's March, we actually had a chant. It was called, what was it? It was banners, strollers, wheelchairs, and flags, to help people remind themselves that the people who in the front of our march are going to be the strollers and wheelchairs and the children, because they set the pace. And we got yelled at. We got yelled at by the cops because they're like, "You're too slow," and we're like, "This is our pace. We're not going anywhere with these people without these people, because they're a very important part of our movement." And so we're hoping to grow more of this kind of sentiment in our movements, because we want to make sure we're not leaving behind our loved ones. So I'll talk about, we do also work very closely with farm workers within our region, but within our region in our state. We had about 2 summers ago, we had a PMA in Bellingham, and we worked with organizations out there to create some community to make sure that the farm workers in the surrounding areas out in Bellingham were getting rights to access to the rights that they deserve, which is fair wages, which is, what are some other things?
So they were asking for breaks.
Asking for breaks, yeah, simple things like that. Making sure they got breaks, lunch breaks, making sure they got fair wages, because a lot of them have families. And so, yeah, we,
Yes.
So actually the farm workers formed their own independent union called Familias Unidas por la Justicia, and recently just ended their boycott. It was I think 3 or 4 year boycott on Sakuma Brothers and eventually Driscoll's, because they were fighting. They were trying to get collective bargaining rights. Finally are in now arbitration. So they're right now negotiating. So I guess the boycott is off for now. So you can eat berries from Skagit Valley. I didn't eat berries for a long time. But yeah, and they're continuing to basically help out other farm workers around the country as well in their struggles. And then correct me if I'm wrong, Joe, but didn't they also either start or try to start their own union?
They are, yeah.
So they started their own union. And so, let's see. And so the organization in Bellingham that we refer to as our sister organization is Community to Community. And they are a farm worker-led environmental justice organization. And so part of the work that we're trying to do is, and like Sean mentioned, is that create a connection between the urban and rural sector, towns and cities, and organizing, because our economies are linked. We in the city benefit greatly from what comes out of rural communities, and often are pitted against each other. So we were there picketing at grocery stores. We were there, meeting with each other, learning about each other's conditions, and basically, just showing, trying to find ways to collaborate together. And also part of it is also we are working to, shift the debate of what it means to do environmental work and climate work. Partnering up with C2C to really fight for a climate policy that reflects real investments into communities who have been deemed sacrifice zones or have been neglected. And so we're working to, in a coalition together with labor, with environmental groups, with faith groups, and health groups to find a way to tax polluters and make that revenue go back into the communities to usher in a transition to a clean energy economy. And so that's going to be an upward battle because who wants to take on the oil companies and the fossil fuel industry? But I think that us being in the room has also been able to shift the dialogue on it. It's not just about carbon pricing, or it's not just about water projects. It's about real investments in communities who have been left behind by the current economy. And so back to that wheel around the extractive economy and the living economy, we see ways that we have to move the investments, we have to move the resources to the communities that need it the most, and then we'll all do better. And create jobs, and create access to healthy foods, and create better, healthier conditions for people in the community. So that's where we believe that people will be energized in the movement, is when they see those actual changes in their communities and those conditions change. And last thing, that we've also been starting to take more actions. As you can see, this is a picture from the climate march, and really getting people out in the streets and is one thing that we do. Really showing that it's not just environmentalists, aren't all like backpacking people with Birkenstocks. So they're youth, they're women, they're fly, and just showing that that environment, being for the environment is being for the community, and being for the community means we're protecting our home, we're protecting each other, we're protecting the earth. And so it really also like bringing in more and more people again into this movement is part of the work, and really shifting the debate. What does it mean to be an environmentalist? What does it mean to be a climate activist? It is like what our Native folks are doing, what they were doing with Standing Rock, is saying that they were water protectors. They were saying, well, we're not activists, we're water protectors. And so it is shifting, like, why do we do this work? Why is it important to, shift the world that we have right now? And so really taking it home and bringing that message home. So that's what I wanted to end with. And maybe you can bring up folks up here so we can do a little, yeah.